Good afternoon, everyone. Hello, we are back together. My name is Ariel Clark. I am so happy to hear everyone is here this afternoon. Thank you. We're going to have a wonderful presentation by Kufikiri Imara. And the discussion this afternoon will be on decriminalization in Oakland, a one-year retrospective on outreach, education, and access. Kufikiri was born and raised in Oakland and in a household with parents who were both San Francisco natives and were active in the civil rights and Black Power movements of San Francisco in the 1960s and 70s. As a result, he grew up in a home and a community environment that strongly emphasized social awareness and social responsibility. His love of the arts and his own personal healing and spiritual journey led him to volunteer work with Green Earth Poets Society, bringing poetry to incarcerated African-American youth. He is one of the early members of the Entheogenic Integration Circle, a support group in New York City with a focus on marginalized communities within the psychedelic community. He is currently involved with the Sacred Garden Communities Facilitators Workshop to deepen his understanding as a ceremonial facilitator working with ethnically diverse communities. He is head of the Decriminalize Nature Oakland committee focused on outreach, education, and access, and is actively engaged with the offices of Oakland City Council members. Access has always been his message, and he continues to work toward accessible choices for ethnically diverse and marginalized communities and their ability to heal themselves. We are so happy to have you. Good afternoon.
Hello. Let me just welcome everyone. Thank you for that lovely and wonderful introduction. Thank you, Ariel. I would like to first just take a moment, just take a deep breath, just ground and really feel this moment. Thank you for all of you that are watching and here are part of this wonderful conference. First, I think it's important to acknowledge that we are in very unique times. This is a very unique moment. And with all that is taking place and unfolding right now, just to acknowledge and pay honor and tribute for all of those making sacrifices to help us navigate this unfolding moment. I was born and raised in a city named Oakland, in a place called California. So before that, and still, I would be remiss not to also acknowledge and honor the Huichin of the Ohlone, who are the land stewards long before there was an Oakland or a California, and for all the indigenous land stewards across the world that allow for even what we are talking about today to be possible is something that needs to be recognized as well. So, pardon me if I'm looking down, my notes are just to the side. I'm going to be speaking a little bit differently than how the prompt and the descript might lead one to believe. I'm going to be speaking from the perspective of myself as someone who has Oakland as a hometown, is very much invested in all the things that happened there, as well as someone who identifies in this moment and cares to see where it goes. And so I'll be speaking from that perspective for myself and not for anyone or anything else. So outreach, education, access. I would like to address them more so as themes, not so much as points of data collection. And so to that, I'll be speaking to outreach as a theme. In outreach, what is one reaching for? In education, is someone coming to learn as well as possibly teach? And in access, what are the motivations? What are the driving intentions when someone seeks to create access? First, let me start with a short statement. It is vital to include the perspectives of marginalized communities in the discourse shaping what some would consider to be called the psychedelic renaissance today and into the future, because the exclusion of the perspectives of marginalized communities will see this renaissance turn into possibly a rebellion or a revolution. And we will see the unifying potential of this unfolding moment become a vehicle for division. So when one is referencing outreach, I think of that. What are they reaching out for? And what are those motivations? To that, how well are they aligning their intentions and their actions? Are they coming from an intention that is self-centered or service-centered? Understanding what it truly means to be of service for someone else. So there's a sense of ownership on a personal and social level about the choices we make and how much they're really aligning our intentions and our actions. And that personal responsibility can create a sense of sovereignty, but as well as accountability, because it is when our intentions and our actions are aligned that we are coming from a place of integrity. But how do we hold ourselves and others accountable for actions, especially at the micro and macro level, in the outreach that's taking place? A lot of it following various tracks of medical, clinical, community, economic, policy. So where someone is standing and their perspective will inform their efforts and their energy around how they're trying to outreach to others and their objective around what that really means. Outreach for someone coming out of a clinical trial is going to look different than someone that's doing outreach coming from policy. But again, around the alignment of intention and action, the integrity and how they show up, and how we show up, and how I show up, and how we all show up. It requires us to look at our blind spots and our false belief systems when we're looking to connect with someone that we don't have a direct connection to, or maybe a direct or indirect understanding of. So the work then in outreach is really about reaching in and gaining an understanding around those motivations, around those intentions, around the actions that we take and how we show up, how I show up. So I think it's important to realize that in the current state of things, even before where we find ourselves now, Oakland was already dealing with its own bit of crisis in the tent cities that line the streets in so many areas of Oakland. And so there's a imbalance in how Oakland views even its own citizens. And in that, the city of Oakland, to a certain degree, is one city of two parts. There's the part where there has been a lot of change in the demographics of the city, but there's a part where there has not been a lot of change, and that is in East Oakland, the more depths of East Oakland, an area where it doesn't look like there's been much change in the attempts of outreach to the communities coming from a place of service. So if we're talking about outreach in Oakland, then I think it's important to understand that we are looking at the whole city and all the citizens of Oakland. Again, even the marginalized communities. Going and showing up, again, with integrity. I'm a big believer that in engaging with others, to start from a place of listening. To come in looking to gain questions and not just bring what I feel are answers. So education. What are we looking to teach? What are we looking to inform? What are we looking to feel we offer to others, to the community? What does the people of Oakland need? Are we teaching them what they need? Are we teaching them what we want to teach them? In areas where someone may not feel that they are in a place where they can have an opportunity to learn something different than their immediate environment because they are in a place where their immediate needs are a greater priority, what do we have to teach them? What do they have to teach us? I've always loved, in any time I was in an academic environment and a teacher would come in excited on the first day of the opportunity to learn from a new class and not just teach. That type of energy is palpable. It resonates. A lot of the objectives in the work that's happening in this moment that's unfolding, that a lot of people have been speaking to, I think about it in two perspectives: healing, and to a certain degree, harm reduction. Now, I know that there is a great community of folks in the harm reduction space doing great work. I hope greater bonds and bridges can be built with that community going forward. So aside from that, if we say, hey, we're speaking to ourselves, we want to go into this place and educate around healing. Yet if we don't know what needs healing, if we're not coming in asking, how can we support? How can we be of service? What perspective are we really teaching from? Because healing is something akin to, if I may use the metaphor, imagine a cut. The body will heal a cut on its own if left to itself to do so, and we can assist it in that process to a certain degree, so the body is in its own process of healing. Yet if we heal, and as soon as we go back out and enter into the world, it feels like a storm of broken glass, then we've healed the cut only to re-enter the space that continues to barrage us. How can we reduce the impact of being in that space so that we're not in a perpetual cycle of healing only to be reharmed? How can we move beyond such narratives and empower ourselves and others? How can we be better listeners? Because then there's a self-agency and ownership in that makes a shift. I think it's an important shift to be mindful of. To be mindful of the responsibility of healing, how one owns it for themselves, and how one looks to be of service to it in community. I think that's the deeper education that we sometimes miss. Access. Access is a luxury for those that are included and a necessity for those that are excluded. Why have a gate at all, let alone gatekeepers? Access is usually defined from someone's perspective and priorities. And so that'll fall differently in what access looks like in places of community, indigenous cultures. It'll look differently around policy, economic endeavor. It'll look different in clinical and medical. Though I think it's important that the perspective we maintain about access is not one of benevolence that we're allowing or offering, because that can be tricky. We don't want to tokenize. Oh, I've gone over here to this place that's different from myself. I've spoken with individuals there. Maybe I've invited one or two or few over into my space. And then I feel like I'm educated about them and I understand what access means. To not just have the voice in the room, not just have the voice in the conversation and just have it be present, though to also have it be valued. To see it as something constructive and beneficial, not something apart that just exists there, but part of the whole. So when we have communities that are dealing with issues of struggle, and we say we want to come into the city of Oakland and help with access, what if we need to help them even reach that access? Are we prepared to do that? A lot of people will talk about the importance of access, though I feel like sometimes it's just theoretical conjecture, because how many people are putting their money where their mouth is? We talk about more diversity in clinical trials that are financed as they are. And so someone has to make a decision based around those factors. When you open a business, if it's not a nonprofit or a charitable organization, then you have certain priorities that dictate what it looks like for you to create access. And there's a value in all of it. The medical and clinical, the policy and economics, indigenous cultures and community. Because not all will be a one size fits for everyone. I've often found that how people come into their most impactful, sometimes their initial experience, will define how they see themselves within the space that is regarded as a psychedelic community. That will often as well shape how they see themselves being of service in the community. It's not about right or wrong, it's just different. For it to learn and be about education, listening and learning, creating access, reaching out. Using the potential of this moment to unify. The importance of what it means to hold space. To not feed into it, to not feed off of it, to simply allow, be present. The importance of right relationship. That goes back to aligning intention and action, operating from a place of integrity. There's a lot of information about where we've come, possibly where we're going. But we're in a new world now than where we were before. We're in a new world than where we were last year. So much changed, and so much is still changing. How will we move forward collectively? Not about substituting one person's opinion for another, so seeing the benefit in the diversity of opinion, moving in a direction of benefit, progress, seeing the value of inviting as many voices into the discourse to have the broadest perspective possible, to not feeling that we have the answers and know who needs to be in the room and who doesn't need to be in the room when decisions are being made that affect more than those that are in that room. I think we can do more if we want to. And I think it's important to realize as much as we show up out in the world, the outer world, society, there's great value in the choices we make when no one's watching. The little choices we make when we don't feel there's great ramification to our action, because there is still importance in the intention, how we show up, how we align intention and action. There will be those that speak to the magic bullet of this moment, though it's important to recognize that, as it's often said, ceremony starts after ceremony. when the real work begins. And that this is work, that this will require work. And how we can do that in supporting others, really. I have to say, I don't intend in any way to be someone that is some seer of the future, knower of all things. I speak from a perspective of someone who looks to show up in a moment to be of service as best I can. And in doing so, I offer that perspective to you. Because from what I've seen, what I've witnessed, what I've been able to be a part of, is how, for me, this is more like an entheogenic emergence. There will be those like an iceberg that will come above ground and it'll rise, and then maybe it'll stay there, but maybe it'll settle back, and there will be those that won't. It'll be an unfolding moment, this emergence that we're in. And how we move through it and navigate it and treat it as a journey and not a destination. So it's important to understand when looking to build bridges through outreach, through education, through access, how we identify with ourselves and in this space, and how others do so, and approaching that from a place of listening. I don't think there'll be anything that happens without great effort, though I do think it's possible that we can have a moment where the value of all these different aspects of community, of the world, of the indigenous cultures, of those working in the medical clinical, those working in policy and economics, can build a synergy that really moves us in the way of growth. I'm not sure where I'm at with time. I just might have a few minutes more. So I'd just like to conclude before going into questions and answers and just say that the importance of how we show up in aligning our intentions and our actions and the authenticity and the integrity in that is more important than any technique or tool we may feel we're bringing to others. To stretch ourselves to grow beyond what's convenient and comfortable in how we show up. If we are truly looking to show up to be of service, and to listen, to come from a place of listening. And so with that, I hope the words I've spoken today can offer some aid in the greater discourse of this moment as it continues to unfold. And for all of you who are watching, wherever you may go forward from here, know that I wish you all the best. And wherever I can be of service, I am honored and humbled to do so. Thank you. So I believe we have Q&A coming up. I'm not sure if we have any questions.
Yeah, we have questions. First, let me say that thank you for everything that you shared. It was a great gift to be able to listen to you, and so many people who are participating and listening. You had so much love flowing, so thank you so much. Yeah, really. And there's so much more I would say for myself. Thank you for speaking about integrity. Thank you for being so embodied and grounded and looking inward position and really leading with listening. My heart hopes so. I am on the road with you. So we have a couple of questions. So the first is thank you. You teach listening as a core value, yeah, which is a great question. And something you share through example. What guidance work can you share toward becoming present listeners?
Guidance for being present listening. When you're willing to listen and acknowledge even the conversations that can be uncomfortable for yourself, then when you're holding space and listening to someone doing that, they'll feel that. Our society so often glorifies the strength of aggression and not the strength and the courage of vulnerability. Where we can be vulnerable with ourselves is where we can be vulnerable with others. And so what works for you in meeting yourself wherever you are in your path right now, to be able to sit in a place of vulnerability with yourself, whether that be 5 seconds or 5 minutes, every little bit is a moment to grow and to strengthen and to be able to come from a place of deeper listening, in my humble opinion.
Mm-hmm. Inward orientation, self-compassion, self-love. Okay, so we have a question on access. Psychologist Carl Jung wrote that individuation, or becoming complete, requires integration of the shadow. And Alan Watts wrote, in all mysteries, when you're going to be initiated, there's someone saying, oh, don't you come in. you've got to fulfill this requirement and this requirement and this requirement, and then we'll let you in. So you go through the mill. The shadow of access to psychedelics is that wall. So what walls are needed here?
If I'm understanding correctly, and I hope this answers the question, what we view and recognize as the psychedelic community doesn't exist in a vacuum. The challenges and ills of society are just as easily reflected in this space. And while there are those that may choose to try to hide in the light to a certain degree, the shadow side of access in the community reflects the shadow sides of the challenges and the ills of society. The internalized value structures we create around what we perceive to be the other person. And so the shadow side of access to, like I was saying before, for those that are in the inclusive, it is a luxury. For those that are excluded, it is a necessity. So if you're in the inclusive and it's a luxury, yet you're in the power position to create access for those where it's a necessity and don't have it, your blind spots, your false belief systems, your internalized narrative that may or may not be true until you know for sure, are that shadow. And that's not an easy thing to do when people are in position to look like an authority figure to then question their own authority, to take risks with grant money and funding to create access where there is no monetary return, but there is greater human return. And so we're those individuals that are able to affect change in that way, to the extent that they themselves are willing to push things to create greater access. Or in that, as I referenced, those who do not have it will find a way to take it or create it for themselves apart, and then you have more division. I don't think will lead us in the best direction. Someone has to stick their neck out. I hope that helps.
Thank you. What is the first call to action you would ask for those who have the spirit but not the knowledge of how to show up?
If you see it as a destination and not a journey, you're missing a big piece. Meet yourself where you are. Prepare yourself as best and as much as you can. And understand that you're not so much taking something on where you feel like you have to fit into someone else's clothes. You're awakening something within yourself. And that is its own journey and its own process, which can be exciting and exhilarating and filled with anxiety. And I am a big believer in don't outsmart your gut. If intuition and spirit are speaking to you and to show up in a certain way, and if you can sit with that and really know for yourself what is your own truth, then the practical steps you take to begin that journey depend on how best you can meet yourself where you are. That would look different for someone that might be in a rich environment of information like the Bay Area, as opposed to a place where someone doesn't have a lot of access to information or community to speak to other people and gain a greater sense of awareness. So wherever you can, wherever you are, in preparing yourself, understanding that this is a journey, and trust your gut.
Yeah, I want to say that it's very remarkable to have the opportunity to hear you speak, and just the encouragement of my own coming into my body and centering and almost expansion. As I mentioned to you, I am a lawyer. That's one of the roles that I play, and it can feel it's in the head, and it can be very quickly paced. It was something, again, a learning. And this is a slowing down and a broadening and a self inquisitiveness that we come inside to then consider outside. I very much, and we all very much appreciate the reminding to listen and to have much more spaciousness. So thank you for that. I did take a moment to say that. I know that there are other questions, so I'll ask one more.
Okay.
How can a psychedelic movement play into shifting the extreme socioeconomic inequalities in the Bay Area?
Solidarity. There are a lot of folks doing a lot of good work, and not just here in the streets of Oakland, but I'm sure cities and places all across the world. So it's not like you need to reinvent the wheel. Showing up in support and in solidarity and right relationship with those that are already doing the work, that are already showing up for those people who, because of the challenges they face in society, for them, it may not even be an option to even consider this type of path for themselves. Yet there are those who help them meet those needs that then allow them to consider life beyond just their day-to-day. So solidarity and being in right relationship and being supportive of those organizations and individuals and entities, and that can take various forms, whether it's monetarily in what you can offer, whether it's physically in your time, whether it's just using your network and your platform and your voice to help lift theirs to somewhere that maybe their voice can't reach. To not let the unsung heroes go unsung until they're gone. Where we can build bridges and connections in that way, because there's a value. One thing about Oakland is there's great value in the cosign. If someone who has already grown a relationship of trust with a community or with an individual, and they're doing that work, that is a great benefit in building right relationship with those type of individuals and organizations and entities, because they have that connection there. Now, when you come with integrity, when you meet with anyone like that, and you're saying, I'm here to support in how I can, this is what I have to offer, then you're looking to build, you're looking to grow. It's not about us coming in with a savior complex, thinking that you have to, keep people in a certain narrative, prospectively, in order to help them. Because it's about empowerment. Oftentimes, people from marginalized communities are asked to relive their narrative from a perspective of victimization to receive any type of assistance or access or help or support. How can we empower them in their request for support, for help, for access, instead of having them be re-traumatized by reliving that which they're seeking to grow beyond. So where those folks are doing that work already, usually not hard to find, because they're always asking for help or support in some way, shape, or another, because no one gets into helping community because they're trying to become rich. And in doing so, coming from a place where you're being authentic about that. And understanding that this doesn't have a timeline. This isn't, again, not about a destination. If you're looking to set up a table with a sign that says healing here, and think that if you just set up your table with your sign, after a week, no one walks up to your table, you're like, well, I'm ready to close this shop up, apparently. Like, you need to come in invested, willing to really grow relationships. One thing I understood when the work we're doing here in Oakland is that while there is certain timelines that are defined by policy and economics, the timeline of building connections and engaging with community is its own organic process that's self-informed. You need to understand that that's going to dictate how things go. If you're trying to work off of some bullet point of I'll come in with this and they'll receive it and then this will happen. Again, the listening place when you're engaging. But yeah, the people are out there doing the work. Please reach out, find support, be in right relationship, be in solidarity, and come in from a place of listening so you can learn what is needed instead of working from your perspective from the outside in.
Thank you. Thank you. It was beautiful to spend time with you. You have, again, many love, many hearts, much deep appreciation. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
See you again.